Okay, terrific. You're good? Great. Well, it's terrific to be here in Bennelong on the day that polling opens. This is a day where polling begins, and we've got Labor's A-team here. Labor leader Bill Shorten, Deputy Leader Tanya Plibersek, Shadow Treasurer Chris Bowen, and of course the Labor Mayor of Ryde, Jerome Laxale. It's so fantastic to have your support on pre-poll this morning. This is a chance for the voters of Bennelong, their first chance to cast a vote and to send a message to Malcolm Turnbull. Enough of your lousy government, enough of your cuts. The Liberals cut services in Bennelong. Labor opens its services here. Well, what we see today, well, an announcement from Malcolm Turnbull, and we welcome this announcement. Today, I'm pleased to say that a Shorten Labor government will build the Macquarie Park Transport Interchange. Labor, alongside Jerome Laxale, has been fighting the Liberals for months now to get more funding for public transport and to ease the congestion in Bennelong. We know, because John Alexander told us last week, that Bennelong has 4 of the most congested roads in the state. And while this is a small victory for Labor and the local community working together, this $100 million commitment to a transport interchange, we're pleased with it, we welcome it, and we will build it if elected. This is what Labor does. We improve services for local people in our community. In fact, the Liberals walked away from the Parramatta to Epping rail link, fully funded by Labor. That train line would be operating today if the Liberals hadn't given $2.1 billion back to the Commonwealth. Now, of course, the Liberals are going to shut the Macquarie Park train station next year. They're going to shut the Macquarie University train station next year. And this is going to cause further congestion and chaos on our local roads. And that's why Labor will not stop fighting for more public transport and better infrastructure for the people of Bennelong. Now, I want to say a few words about preferences. I note today that John Alexander and the Liberals are preferencing a One Nation party member above Labor. There's a candidate running in this by-election who has stood previously for One Nation. He is One Nation through and through. And the Liberals are preferencing him above Labor. Now, John Alexander said this morning that he didn't know. He was unaware. Well, John Alexander should read his own How to Vote. But if John Alexander and the Liberals really didn't know that this person was a One Nation party member, then they should pulp their How to Vote cards. They should tear them up, they should get rid of them, and they should issue new ones. There is no place for racism in Australian politics. There is no place for racism and racist parties in modern Australian politics. Labor always puts One Nation and racist minor parties last. We have done so in Bennelong, and we will always do so. So now it's up to John Alexander and the Liberals. They need to show that they are fair dinkum, that they didn't know that this person was a One Nation party member. They need to pulp those How to Votes, and they need to issue new ones. Well, I am really pleased, as I said, to have the A-team here today, starting with Labor leader Bill Shorten. He's been fantastic on the polling booths this morning, and it's great to have him here. Welcome, Bill, to Bennelong.
Thanks, Kristina. And today, voting has started in the crucial Bennelong by-election. Today is now the first day that the voters of Bennelong can send a message to Malcolm Turnbull. They can send a message that they don't want cuts to the funding of their schools or higher university fees. They can send a message that they want Medicare to be properly funded with no more cuts. And they can send a message that they don't want Malcolm Turnbull's dud second-class NBN. And yesterday, we found out, again, more bad news about the dud NBN that Malcolm Turnbull has inflicted on Australians and on the voters in Bennelong. Bennelong is ground zero for the dud NBN of Malcolm Turnbull. I mean, Malcolm Turnbull used to treat the NBN as his pride and joy, his crowning achievement. He was, after all, the communications minister, and now he's the Prime Minister. He was very proud of all of the decisions he's made on the NBN, but the problem is he now has to accept responsibility both as Prime Minister and as the Communications Minister for the shocking and appalling policy decisions he's made. The fact that we've now found out yesterday and again this morning that the NBN is going to be delayed by another 9 months, that his much vaunted HFC solution has turned out to be nothing but an unmitigated disaster. Today, the voters of Bennelong, not just for themselves but on behalf of all Australians, can send a message to Malcolm Turnbull that if this is his best, it's just not good enough for Bennelong. We're happy to take any questions.
Mr. Shorten, what did you make of this morning's $100 million announcement, and would you characterise it as pork barrelling?
Let's all tell the truth here. If it wasn't for Kristina Keneally and Labor's spirited campaign in Bennelong, does anyone think Malcolm Turnbull would have announced a $100 million interchange? Does anyone even think he would have visited Bennelong, except for Kristina's campaign and Labor's determined commitment? The fact of the matter is that Malcolm Turnbull doesn't know where this interchange is. He didn't care about this interchange because if he did, he would have said something before this by-election. Kristina Keneally is already paying dividends for the voters of Bennelong, and she hasn't even got elected. I say to the voters of Bennelong, if this is what Kristina Keneally can do with a week into the campaign, why not make her your regular member for Bennelong, and she'll deliver wonderful things in a Labor government. Well, I think that people see that Malcolm Turnbull's desperate and he'll just chuck the kitchen sink because he knows that he's got a divided party. But that doesn't mean that we're going to stand by and not support better transport options for locals. This is what Labor does. We support public transport. We support more productive cities. We want to make it easier that people can get to work and to study. But I do think that people will realise in the case of Turnbull that he's just looked around the policy cupboard, found it's bare, said, right, we'll spend this money here, there's a demand. But everyone knows that if Kristina Keneally wasn't giving the Bennelong by-election a red-hot go, does anyone think the voters of Bennelong would be getting anything? And I can promise the voters of Bennelong, if you put a 1 next to Kristina's name, you will see more good policies in schools, in NBN and Medicare than you're going to get under the current mob.
The Premier, though, says, in fact, it was your government, your state government, that created the problem, allowing so much residential development without any infrastructure going in.
Are you serious? That's what she said today. This Liberal government has presided over thousands of unit approvals in Bennelong. They have presided over the Liberals here in New South Wales' utter congestion. They are going to close the Epping to Chatswood rail line. They gave back $2.1 billion of funding for the Parramatta to Epping. I mean, seriously, who gives back $2.1 billion of a fully funded rail line that would be operating today, easing congestion? It would go from Parramatta through to Carlingford, through to Epping, and over to Macquarie Uni and Macquarie Park. I find it laughable that the Liberals want to try and claim that somehow the mess, the congestion, the chaos that is on the roads here in Bennelong is anyone else's problem but theirs. It is their issue, their problem. Look, we're happy that Malcolm Turnbull's come to town today with $100 million. We'll match it. We'll build that interchange. It's extraordinary that it's taken this long for them to wake up to the problems they're creating.
Closing that line from Metrofire.
Sorry?
This announcement just simply shows that they're fighting with you because they're concerned, they're worried.
Yeah, listen, Kristina's too modest, I'll tell you. Malcolm Turnbull is absolutely scared of Kristina Keneally winning Bennelong. Everyone knows, every fair-minded person knows, that as nice a fella as John Alexander is, this is the dynamo, this is the energy which Bennelong needs. Does anyone, and the real test of Turnbull's desperation, does anyone really imagine that if Kristina wasn't running a very strong campaign, that Malcolm Turnbull would have materialised in Bennelong announcing $100 million for an interchange? Everyone knows that but for Kristina Keneally's insurgent campaign, supported by a united Labor team, nothing would have happened from the Turnbull government.
Ms. Keneally, what was also said this morning is that while the Liberal government are building the metro, you scrapped it. You had a metro and you didn't build it, and that's, according to the other side, part of the root of the whole problem.
Yeah, look, I make very clear, very different circumstances, not at a politically opportune time either, but it was the right decision. Saved billions of dollars for the taxpayers of New South Wales. And as I said, there was a $2.1 billion Parramatta to Epping rail line, fully funded by Labor, ready to go, be operating today. Barry O'Farrell, Mike Baird, and Gladys Baird-Gicklian turned that money back. We don't have that rail line today. And that's extraordinary. That is a extraordinary loss to the people of Bennelong. It's an extraordinarily stupid decision by the Liberal government.
Just for the record, when did you announce that the American citizenship?
Oh, really? It was in 2002. And you know what? It's been posted online. And I tell you what, the U.S. State Department helpfully puts online a list of all people who've expatriated, and you can find me there.
Keneally, just you made a claim about the rivers closing to railway stations.
Yep.
How do you substantiate that claim?
They've announced it.
But aren't they doing
They've
that
announced
to
that.
metrify the lines?
It's temporary. Yes, that's the point.
They can't tell us exactly when they're closing them. They can't tell us for how long they're closing them. And they can't tell us how many buses they're going to use. What we estimate would be about 30 extra minutes if you're commuting from Chatswood to get to Macquarie University. This is chaos. This is dysfunction. I mean, I take the 506 from Macquarie Uni, where I work, to my house in Baronia Park. I know the chaos in peak hour. Everyone who lives in this community understands the chaos, and it is only going to get worse. There is no plan. This is a rush job by Malcolm Turnbull, but you know what? We know that the area needs the money, so we'll match it. We'll build the interchange.
Social development is a huge issue in this area. Have you got any plans, or are you going to ask the state government to curb it?
Well, look, this is a Liberal state government that ran on a platform that they were going to turn planning powers back to local communities. They've done anything but. They've presided over thousands of unit developments in this area. And one thing I keep hearing over and over, whether I'm talking to people at train stations or on the phone, is they're telling me their frustrations about the congestion. Last week, John Alexander turned up to Macquarie University. He told us that 4 of the most congested roads in the state were in Bennelong. Last week, his promise was they would fund some type of traffic data monitoring system. I mean, we don't need to count the traffic. We need to fix it.
Ms. Keneally, do you have any thoughts on the fact that it came up this morning that John Alexander, when he was playing tennis, went to South Africa during the apartheid era? Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I'm not going to pass any comment on that.
Mr. Shorten, on the Banking Royal Commission, it doesn't look like Mr. Turnbull's going to change his mind on it.
Listen, when Malcolm Turnbull says he's not going to change his mind, get prepared for a change of mind. Let's be upfront here. The government and its members are running around like a bunch of headless chooks. They're so busy fighting each other. And the reason why they're all fighting each other is because there is a vacuum of leadership at the top. I say to Australians, if you want to be guaranteed of a Royal Commission, vote for me and Labor at the next election. I also say to Mr. Turnbull, you know, this fight is over, but you just haven't worked it out. One way or the other, sooner or later, there's going to be a Banking Royal Commission. And the way I see this happening sooner is that either the government splits and some government members vote for Labor's Royal Commission, or at the next election, if Labor is successful, we'll just legislate for a Royal Commission. The Australian people, I think, do not understand why Malcolm Turnbull is fighting so hard to protect the banks. He doesn't fight hard for a first-class NBN. He doesn't fight hard to make sure schools are properly funded. He doesn't fight hard for Medicare. He doesn't fight hard to restore people's penalty rates. But somehow, when it comes to the banks, the big 4 banks, then all of a sudden, Turnbull shows some uncharacteristic courage and will fight tooth and nail to defend them. Well, I've got news for him. As hard as he fights to defend the banks, the will of the Australian people will not be denied, and Labor will implement, either sooner or later, a Banking Royal Commission.
Mr. Shorten, can you tell us what would, if you're elected, if your government's elected, what would you do about the NBN now? Would you go back and put fibre to the premises of every house in Australia, or would you stick with the current model?
Well, obviously you can't rip out every mistake that Turnbull has made. I'll be upfront with people on that. But what I do ask Mr. Turnbull is that before the next election, right now, will you finally listen to the technology experts and do it right the first time? The fact of the matter is that Bennelong is ground zero for his dud NBN. I mean, let's just remember, Malcolm Turnbull's pride and joy were his policy decisions on the NBN. First as Communications Minister, making the very significant decisions which have now proven to be so horribly wrong, and now he's the Prime Minister. just for once in Mr Turnbull's life, can he accept responsibility for his mistakes rather than trying to blame everyone else? So we hope that he will put more fibre in now, because the longer this train wreck goes on, the harder it is to fix it.
But by the sounds of it, the answer to the question is no. It won't guarantee that you will put fibre into housing.
No, I don't want to repeat my whole answer, but that isn't what I said. What I said is that the longer this goes on, the harder it is to fix the rollout that he does. But we are very committed to having more fibre in our offer to Australians. You know, for Pete's sake, isn't it better just to do it right the first time? And we're seeing, I think, real problems. And I think the ACCC needs to have a good look at the NBN, because every day consumers are getting more and more annoyed. The fact of the matter is that Australians are now trying to delay their disconnection because they understand that they're entering worse problems with the new system. And at the end of the day, where does the buck stop? Malcolm Turnbull. He was Communications Minister. He championed his so-called solutions, and now his solutions have found out to be very hollow indeed, like much of what this out-of-touch government does.
In the wake of these many allegations against John Burke, a lot of his victims are calling for his order of Australia medicine to revoke. Do you agree with this fact?
Yeah, I think that is something which has to be looked at. I mean, the allegations, I want to say first of all to the victims who've come forward, and there's been plenty of them. This is not easy to do or to relive or to talk about. But you're right, there should be some accountability for his behaviour.
And this incident in Melbourne where the police have arrested and foiled a terror plot, can you be any comment?
Well, yet again, I think it shows that our security services are top-notch. They're working very hard. I've only got admiration for the way our security services are keeping us safe. And I think in amongst the heat and the noise and the fury of the Bennelong by-election, all Australians, both in Bennelong and beyond, should realise that when it comes to fighting terror, Labor and Liberal are on the same page, as we should be, by the way. So I'm very pleased with the work of our agencies.
Should people be concerned about New Year's Eve?
No, I think if there's something to be concerned about, our security agencies will tell us. The worst thing we can do is change our behaviour and sort of give in to this potential for threat. We've got to go on living our lives. When we change the way we live, and if we live in lives of greater fear and insecurity, then the bad guys win. But I'm confident that our security agencies are doing the best they can.
Ms Keneally, can I just ask on your record as Premier, would you want the voters to take that into account, or is this a clean slate? Would they judge you on your past there, or what are you proud of that?
I am asking the people of Bennelong to have a long, hard look at Malcolm Turnbull, have a long, hard look at this lousy government, have a long, hard look at the cuts, have a long, hard look at the chaos, have a long, hard look at the dysfunction. This is a government that is eating itself alive in front of the Australian people. You know, this is my community, it's where I live. And I know that my fellow residents are so frustrated. 20% electricity price in New South Wales this year, a 20% rise in electricity prices in New South Wales this year. Malcolm Turnbull said in February it was going to be his number one priority. Well, he made it a priority, all right. Those prices just went up. And, you know, look around. 4 of the most congested roads in the state here in Bennelong. Too little, too late from Malcolm Turnbull, but we do welcome a $100 million commitment to the bus interchange, and we will back it in. We will celebrate it as a small victory for what Jerome Laxale and Labor have been fighting for here in Ryde. You know, this is an opportunity for the people of Bennelong to send a message. To send a message to Malcolm Turnbull, enough of his cuts, enough of his chaos, enough of his dysfunction. I'm standing up for my local community. One thing the people of New South Wales know about me is I never stand back from what I'm standing up from what I believe in. I never stand back from a fight. And I will fight as hard as possible for my local community to get a much better deal, and hopefully under a Shorten Labor government. Thank you.
Something that Ms Keneally, the question was though, why don't you say, I was proud of what I did as Premier?
I am proud. Absolutely. I'm putting myself forward for Bennelong because I know that Bennelong deserves a better deal. I know that Bennelong deserves a better deal than what they're getting under this lousy Liberal government with its cuts and its chaos, its dysfunction. As I said, this is a government eating itself alive right in front of the Australian people. Yesterday, here in Bennelong, we got the news. 9 more months we're going to wait for an NBN. It's a second-rate NBN anyway, and it's a third-rate government. This is an opportunity for the people of Bennelong to send a message loud and clear. Enough, Malcolm Turnbull, enough. Enough of your lousy government. I want to thank everyone.
Shorten, Kristina
Oh,
Keneally just...
yeah, sorry, the Weekly Times.
Local paper.
Oh,
So
good.
We'll
we
take
know
them.
that the big issue in our local area is the electricity bills, which are 30% rather
Yeah.
than 20%. What can you do about that?
We can start creating policy certainty at the national level. Now, policy certainty sounds like, just another sentence, but what it means is this. We won't get new investment in new energy generation until the rules are clear, the direction this nation's going and policy is clear. So the policy uncertainty of both Abbott and Turnbull for now in their 5th year has meant we've seen a lot of investment in new generation stalled. What we need to do is be very clear about where we're going, and we want to be in line with the rest of the world. More renewable energy in our energy mix. We need to reform the national energy markets. We need to also make sure that we're getting the gas that is produced in Australia prioritised to be sold to Australian industry first. So Labor is for certainty. This will deliver new jobs in renewables. It'll deliver fair income action on climate change. And the fact of the matter is that good energy policy is good environment policy and vice versa. So we've got a plan to help put downward pressure on energy prices. We said we'd back the chief scientist. The government backflipped on that. We are determined to make sure that Australians get lower energy prices, and we're going to do it by encouraging investment in renewable energy.
There are reports that New South Wales National is putting pressure on its government to build and fund the new coal-fired power stations. What are your thoughts on that?
Listen, I think the National Party's in the process of divorcing the Liberal Party, so they're looking for their own headlines. The fact of the matter is that there isn't going to be a whole wave of new investment in new coal-fired power stations, and the sooner the politicians start telling the people the truth, the better we'll all be. All right, thanks everybody.
Everyone. Thank you all.
So there they go, off to do some more campaigning in the seat of Bennelong. The Labor leader and opposition leader Bill Shorten with his candidate Kristina Keneally. And it all gets very real in the Bennelong by-election campaign from today, because pre-poll voting has opened, which will also explain why the Prime Minister went into the electorate with his candidate John Alexander earlier in the day. Every vote counts from here on in. And don't forget that Australians increasingly do try to exercise a pre-poll vote more than on Saturday, the 16th of December, which is the actual by-election date. And the announcement that both sides are really matching up to there is about $100 million worth of transport hub upgrades around the Macquarie University North Ryde area. Malcolm Turnbull has promised it, and we just heard Labor backing it in. Now, we're